The morning my son took my life savings, I smiled and handed him the paperwork he asked for. He thought I was finally giving in. He thought the money was going straight toward his wedding, the luxury venue, the flowers, the champagne, and the life he wanted everyone to believe he could afford. But there was one thing Marcus didn't know. A few hours earlier, I had sat across from my attorney, Richard Hayes, with trembling hands and signed something that would change everything. Marcus never asked what I signed that morning. He never even looked. And that was his biggest mistake. Before I tell you what happened next, stay with me. If stories about family, betrayal, forgiveness, and finding the courage to stand up for yourself speak to your heart, please take a moment to like this story and subscribe to the channel. And I want to hear from you. What would you do if your own child asked for everything you had saved for your future? Would you give it to them, or would you finally say no? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because I never imagined my own son would be the person who taught me the hardest lesson of my life. The truth is, I never thought of Marcus as the kind of son who would take advantage of me. If you had asked me that question 6 months earlier, I probably would have defended him without hesitation. I would have told you that Marcus was a good man, maybe a little stubborn, maybe too ambitious, maybe too concerned with appearances sometimes, but good. He was my only child, and for 35 years I had carried that belief in my heart. I was 68 years old when this story began, and by then I had learned that life rarely breaks your heart all at once. Usually, it happens quietly, one disappointment at a time. My husband James had been gone for almost 4 years. Losing him had changed the rhythm of my life. The house felt different without his footsteps in the hallway, without his newspaper folded beside the coffee cup, without his habit of calling out from the garage whenever he couldn't find something that was sitting right in front of him. James used to laugh and say I was the organized one in our marriage. He wasn't wrong. For more than 30 years, I worked as a bookkeeper for a public high school in Columbus, Ohio. I wasn't wealthy. I never drove expensive cars, never owned designer clothes, and never took extravagant vacations. But I knew how to save. Every paycheck I put something away. Sometimes it was only $20, sometimes $50. When we had extra money, I saved more. When something broke, I repaired it instead of replacing it. When my friends invited me on expensive trips, I usually smiled and said, "Maybe next time." James used to tease me about it. "You're going to die with a full savings account," he'd say. And I'd laugh. "No, I'm going to live long enough to enjoy it." After James died, those words became more important to me than either of us had realized. That savings account wasn't just money. It represented every lunch I packed instead of buying, every dress I wore one extra year. Every Saturday morning, I spent balancing numbers at the kitchen table. It represented security, peace, the ability to wake up one morning and know that if my roof leaked, or my car broke down, or I needed help later in life, I wouldn't have to beg anyone, especially my son. Marcus had always been my greatest pride. When he was little, he was the boy who followed me everywhere. If I went into the kitchen, he followed. If I went outside to water the flowers, he followed. If I sat down to read, he would climb beside me and put his head against my shoulder. I still remembered his first day of kindergarten. He had been wearing a little blue backpack that looked almost as big as he was. He stood at the school entrance holding my hand so tightly that his fingers were cold. "Mom," he whispered, "don't leave yet." I knelt down in front of him. "I'll be right here when you come back." He looked at me seriously. "Promise?" I promised. And I kept that promise in one form or another for the next 30 years. When he played baseball, I was in the bleachers. When he struggled with school, I stayed up helping him. When he wanted to attend college, James and I adjusted our budget so we could help him. And after James died, I still kept helping whenever Marcus needed something. That's what mothers do, I told myself. At least that's what I had always believed. Marcus eventually built a respectable career in real estate. He wasn't rich, but he knew how to make people think he was doing better than he actually was. He dressed well. He drove a newer SUV. He liked good restaurants. He talked about investments and houses and business opportunities. I was proud of him. Sometimes I worried that he spent too much, but whenever I mentioned it, he would laugh. "Mom, I know what I'm doing," so I stopped asking. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Marcus called me. His voice sounded different. Excited. "Mom, I've got something to tell you." I smiled as I stood at my kitchen counter. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I'm getting married." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had known Marcus had been dating Jasmine, but I hadn't realized they were ready to take that step. "Oh, Marcus," I said, and I could hear my own voice trembling. "That's wonderful." He laughed. "I knew you'd be happy. Of course I'm happy." And I was. I truly was. A few weeks later, I met Jasmine for dinner. She was beautiful, confident, and charming. She had a way of speaking that made everything sound exciting. She told me about the wedding she had imagined since she was a little girl. A beautiful ballroom, tall floral arrangements, live music, a long white aisle, hundreds of guests. She talked about photographs and lighting and the reception menu. At first, I found it sweet. Every bride should dream about her wedding. I even told her, "I want you to have a beautiful day." She smiled and took my hand. "That's why I'm so grateful you're Marcus's mother." I remember those words because at the time I thought they were affectionate. I didn't understand what they would eventually come to mean. Over the next several weeks, the wedding became the center of everything. Every conversation seemed to come back to it. The venue had changed. The guest list had grown. The photographer cost more. The flowers were upgraded. Then there was the rehearsal dinner. Then the honeymoon. Every time I saw Marcus, there was another detail. But I didn't complain. This was his wedding, his one big day, and I wanted to be the mother who celebrated rather than criticized. One evening, while we were sitting at my dining table, Marcus asked me a question that seemed innocent. "Mom, are you still with the same bank?" I looked up from my coffee. "Yes. Why, just wondering." He shrugged. Then he asked, "Do you still have that savings account Dad set up?" I smiled. "Yes. How much is in it now?" The question caught me off guard. I gave a small laugh. "Why do you need to know?" He smiled too. "I don't. I was just curious." I let it go. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But a few days later, he asked again. Not the exact amount this time, just whether I had enough saved to be comfortable. I told him I was fine. He nodded. Then he changed the subject. I should have paid closer attention, but I didn't, because I was still looking at him through the eyes of the mother who had watched a little boy hold her hand outside kindergarten. I wasn't yet looking at him as a grown man who had started calculating what his mother owned. That realization would come later. Much later. And when it did, I would wish I had remembered those small questions. Because sometimes the warning doesn't arrive as a threat. Sometimes it arrives as a casual question over coffee. Sometimes it arrives with a smile. And sometimes the person asking it is the very person you would trust with your life. By the time spring arrived, Marcus and Jasmine's wedding had become something much bigger than a wedding. It had become a production. At first, I thought that was simply how weddings were these days. I had been married for 40 years, and my own wedding to James had been small. We had rented a community hall, borrowed decorations from friends, and served food that my aunt had helped prepare. Nobody cared about matching napkins. Nobody hired a photographer for 8 hours. Nobody talked about a wedding as though it were a business investment. But Marcus and Jasmine were different. They wanted everything to be perfect. And perfect, I soon learned, was expensive. One Saturday morning, Marcus picked me up so we could visit the wedding venue. The place was beautiful. It was an elegant hotel on the outskirts of Columbus, with tall windows, polished floors, crystal chandeliers, and a staircase that seemed designed specifically for dramatic wedding photographs. I remember standing there and thinking that James would have loved the architecture. Then the event coordinator handed Marcus a folder. Marcus opened it. His expression changed. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. I watched him turn a few pages. "Marcus." He closed the folder. "They added a few fees." "How much?" He hesitated. "About 12,000. I nearly dropped my purse. $12,000. "It sounds worse than it is, Mom." I stared at him. "How does $12,000 sound better than $12,000? He laughed awkwardly. "It's the upgraded package." I looked at Jasmine. She was standing beside us, smiling politely. "I just want everything to be beautiful," she said. I understood that. Of course I did. But there was something about the way Marcus immediately defended the expense that bothered me. Still, I didn't say anything. I told myself that it was their money, their wedding, their choice. A few weeks later, Marcus called me again. "Mom, can I come by?" Of course. He arrived that evening, carrying a paper bag from a restaurant I liked. He was unusually cheerful. He handed me the bag. "I brought dinner." I smiled. "You didn't have to." "I know." We sat at the kitchen table. For a while he talked about work. Then he talked about Jasmine. Then the wedding. And eventually, he got to the real reason he had come. "We're a little short." I looked at him. "How short?" He gave me a number. It wasn't 12,000. It was more. Much more. I put my fork down. "Marcus, that's a lot of money." "I know. I thought you had a budget." "We did." "What?" He sighed. Things changed. I waited. He started listing the expenses, the venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, the hotel rooms for out-of-town guests, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon deposit. By the time he finished, I realized something. There was no budget anymore. There was only a number that kept getting bigger. "I can help you," I finally said. His face brightened. "I knew you would." I told him the amount I was comfortable giving. It was generous. More than I had originally planned. Enough that I thought it would make a meaningful difference. But Marcus didn't smile. He just stared at me. Then he asked. That's all. I thought I had misheard him. "What?" He leaned back in his chair. "I thought you were going to help us more." I felt something tighten inside my chest. "Marcus, I'm giving you a significant amount of money." "I know." "Then why are you acting disappointed?" "I'm not disappointed. You look disappointed." He rubbed his forehead. "Mom, this wedding is important. I know it is. It's once in a lifetime. So is retirement." He didn't laugh. Neither did I. The silence between us felt unfamiliar. Finally, Marcus said, "I just thought you'd want to make sure your only son had the wedding he deserved." I looked at him carefully. "Your wedding doesn't have to be the biggest wedding in the room to be meaningful." He looked away. I knew I had touched something. A few days later, Jasmine called me. Her voice was sweet. Almost too sweet. "Imani, I hope you don't mind me calling." "Of course not. I just wanted to thank you for helping Marcus." "You're welcome." There was a pause. Then she said, "He really wants everything to be special." "I know. and honestly, I think he's under a lot of pressure. I said nothing. She continued. I've always dreamed about this kind of wedding. I understand, and Marcus keeps telling me not to worry. Her voice softened. I just don't want him to feel like he couldn't provide. There it was. The same pressure, just delivered differently. I sat silently at my kitchen table while Jasmine talked about how embarrassed Marcus would feel if they had to make certain cuts. When the call ended, I stared at my coffee for a long time. I didn't tell Marcus that I felt manipulated. I didn't tell Jasmine that I thought they were spending money they didn't have. Instead, I went to the bank the following week. I wanted to look at my savings, not because I planned to give them more. At least, that's what I told myself. I simply wanted to know where I stood. I sat across from a bank representative and looked at the figures on the screen. My savings were there. The money James and I had spent decades building. Money that was supposed to give me peace in my later years. I thought about the roof, the car, unexpected medical bills, home repairs, the possibility that someday I might need help around the house. I thought about how quickly a lifetime of savings could disappear. And for the first time, I wondered whether Marcus understood that. That evening, I called my friend Denise Williams. Denise and I had known each other for more than 30 years. She had always been the kind of friend who would tell me what I didn't want to hear. I told her about the wedding. I told her about Marcus asking how much I had saved. I told her about Jasmine's phone call. Denise was quiet for several seconds. Then she said, Imani, can I ask you something? Sure. Has Marcus ever asked you what you need? I frowned. What do you mean? Has he asked how much money you need to live comfortably? I thought about it. No. Has he asked whether you're prepared for emergencies? No. Has he asked what would happen if you lived another 20 or 30 years? I didn't answer. Denise sighed. Then he isn't planning for your future. I didn't want to hear that. Denise, he's getting married. He's stressed. I know. He's not a bad person. I didn't say he was. He loves me. I hope he does. That answer hurt more than I expected. Denise continued gently. Helping your child is one thing, Imani. Letting your child count your money, like it's already his is something else. I stared out the window. The evening sun was fading behind the houses across the street. I don't know what to do, I whispered. Denise answered immediately. Yes, you do. What? You just don't want to admit it yet. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying Marcus's questions. How much do you have? Are you still with the same bank? Do you have enough to be comfortable? And suddenly, those questions didn't sound innocent anymore. They sounded like someone measuring a locked door. The next morning, Marcus called. Mom, yes, we need to talk about the rest of the money. My stomach dropped. What rest? He laughed softly. Mom, don't make this difficult. I sat very still. Then he said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. You have more than enough. You don't need all of it. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I heard my son, not as the little boy who once begged me not to leave him at kindergarten. I heard him as a grown man who had begun deciding what his mother deserved to keep. And something inside me quietly changed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply said, we'll talk about it later. Then I hung up. That was the first time I chose silence for a different reason. I wasn't giving in. I was beginning to listen. Marcus came to my house 2 evenings later. I knew something was wrong before he even knocked. His car pulled into the driveway just after 7. He stayed inside for almost a minute, staring at the house. I watched him through the living room window. Then he finally stepped out. He wasn't carrying anything. No dinner, no flowers, no smile, just a folder tucked beneath his arm. I opened the door before he knocked. "Come in." "Thanks, Mom." He walked past me and sat at the kitchen table. I followed. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he placed the folder on the table. "We need to take care of this." I looked at it. "What is it?" "Some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork? Bank stuff?" My heart began beating faster. "Why do I need to sign bank paperwork?" He sighed. "Because I need to make sure the wedding payments go through." I stared at him. "You mean my money?" "Our money." The words landed heavily. I slowly leaned back in my chair. "Marcus, my savings are not our money." He looked irritated. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that. You just said it. I mean, we're family. We are. So why are you acting like I'm some stranger asking you for help?" I looked at my son. That was the part that hurt. He had somehow turned my boundary into an accusation against him. "I already agreed to help you," I said. "You agreed to help a little." "I agreed to give you more than I can comfortably afford. But you can afford it." I stared at him. "How do you know what I can afford? You have savings." "Yes, a lot of savings." I felt a chill move through me. "That doesn't mean you know what I need." Marcus leaned forward. "Mom, you're 68. You have the house. You have Social Security. You have retirement income. You don't need to keep all that cash sitting there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Don't need," he nodded. "You're not raising a family anymore." "No," I said quietly. "I'm trying to prepare for the years when I may need help. You have me." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "You're asking me for my savings because you say you'll take care of me later." "Exactly. Marcus, do you hear yourself?" His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to build my future, and you're asking me to risk mine." He stood up. "Why are you making this so difficult?" I looked at the folder. "Because you're asking me to sign something I haven't read. It's nothing complicated. Then you won't mind if I take it to someone." His expression changed. "To who?" "An attorney." He laughed. "Mom, seriously, yes. You don't need a lawyer for this. Then you shouldn't be worried about me showing it to one." He picked up the folder. For a moment, I thought he was going to leave. Instead, he opened it and pushed several pages toward me. "Just sign here." I didn't touch the pen. "What does this do?" "It gives me access so I can handle the transfers." "Why do you need access?" "Because the vendors need to be paid quickly. Then they can be paid by you." With what I looked at him, he didn't answer. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. The wedding wasn't just short on money. The wedding was depending on mine. Marcus sat back down. His voice became softer. "Mom, please." I recognized that voice. It was the voice he had used as a child when he wanted something. The voice that once made me give in. "Please, don't do this to me." I felt tears forming in my eyes. "I'm not doing anything to you. You are. How you're making me look like I can't afford my own wedding." I stared at him. "Marcus, I never asked you to have a wedding you couldn't afford." He looked away. Then he said something that broke my heart. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. I am helping you. Not enough." There was the truth. Not enough. Nothing I gave would ever be enough if he had already decided that my savings belonged to him. I pushed the papers back. "I'm not signing tonight." His face hardened. "Fine. He grabbed the folder. Then he stopped at the doorway. You know what Dad would have helped me. I felt as though he'd slapped me. Don't use your father against me. He would have understood. You don't know what your father would have done. He believed in me. So do I. Then prove it. The door closed behind him. I stood there alone. I could hear his car starting outside. Then the sound faded down the street. I didn't move for several minutes. Eventually, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the empty space where the papers had been. I thought about James. Marcus was right about one thing. James had always believed in our son, but James had also taught me something Marcus had apparently forgotten. Love and trust were not the same thing. That night, I called Denise. She answered on the second ring. How bad I laughed sadly. You know me too well. What happened? I told her everything. When I finished, Denise was silent. Then she said, Don't sign anything. I won't. Good. I think he's angry. He can be angry. I don't want to lose my son. You're not losing him by saying no. I closed my eyes. What if I am? Then, Imani, you need to ask yourself something. What were you holding on to, a relationship with your son? Or were you holding on to the version of him you remember? That question stayed with me. I went upstairs. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out an old photograph. Marcus was about 8 years old. James was standing behind him. I was kneeling beside them. All three of us were smiling. Marcus had one arm around my neck. I stared at that photograph until my eyes filled with tears. That boy was still inside the man standing in my kitchen. I knew he was. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Maybe it was the pressure of adulthood. Maybe it was his desire to impress Jasmine's family. Maybe it was the life he wanted people to think he could afford. Or maybe I had simply protected him too much. I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I could not keep pretending nothing was wrong. The following morning, I called my bank. I asked whether there had been any recent requests concerning my accounts. The representative placed me on hold. I waited. When she returned, her voice was careful. There was an inquiry regarding account access. My heart stopped. What kind of inquiry? I can't discuss certain details without verifying additional information. But was it recent? Yes. Who made it? There was another pause. Then she said, I can't disclose that over the phone. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the phone. Marcus had asked about my accounts. He had brought paperwork. He had insisted that I sign. And now there had been an inquiry about access. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe there was an explanation. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I opened the small notebook where I kept important phone numbers. James had written Richard Hayes's name there years ago. Richard had been our attorney for several matters involving the house. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. I stared at his number. Then I picked up the phone. Hello. A man's voice answered. Richard Hayes. Richard, this is Imani Carter. There was a brief silence. Then his voice softened. Imani, it's been a long time. Yes. Is everything okay? I looked toward the photograph of James sitting on my dresser. No, I whispered. It isn't. Richard asked me to come to his office. I agreed. Before hanging up, he said something I didn't understand at the time. Bring every document your son has asked you to sign. I swallowed. Why? Because, Imani, if you're uncomfortable enough to call me, there's probably a reason. I looked down at my hands. For the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt determination. Marcus thought I was going to sign whatever he put in front of me. I thought being my son gave him a special kind of access to my life. But the next morning, I was going to walk into Richard Hayes's office, and before I signed another piece of paper, I was going to understand exactly what it meant. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Marcus's voice. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me." I had spent 35 years believing that sentence meant something beautiful, that a mother was supposed to be there, that a mother was supposed to sacrifice, that a mother was supposed to make sure her child never felt alone. But now I wondered whether Marcus had quietly changed the meaning. Perhaps in his mind, being his mother meant I was supposed to say yes. Every time, no matter the cost. I got dressed slowly and drove to Richard Hayes's office. It was a gray morning in Columbus, and rain tapped softly against my windshield. I kept thinking about turning around. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Marcus had simply made a mistake. Maybe the inquiry at the bank had nothing to do with him. I wanted that to be true. I desperately wanted it to be true. When I arrived, Richard was waiting for me. He was sitting behind his desk with the calm expression I remembered from years earlier. "Imani," he said, standing to greet me. "Come in." I placed my purse on the chair and handed him the folder Marcus had given me. Richard didn't open it immediately. Instead, he looked at me. "Before we talk about the documents, tell me exactly what happened." So I did. I told him about the wedding, the expenses, the money I had already offered. Marcus asking about my savings, the papers, the bank inquiry, and finally, the argument in my kitchen. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Did Marcus ever explain exactly what these documents would allow him to do?" "He said he needed access to make payments." "Did he say how long he would have access?" "No." "Did he explain whether you could revoke that access?" "No." "Did you sign anything?" "No." Richard nodded. "Good." He opened the folder. He read through the first page, then the second. His expression didn't change, but I noticed his eyes becoming more focused. What I asked, "Some of this language is broader than what your son described." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means you should never sign this without understanding exactly what authority you're giving someone." I looked at the papers. "I thought it was just for wedding payments." "It may be intended that way," he said, "but intention isn't the same as legal effect." Those words frightened me. I had always trusted documents. After working with numbers for so many years, I believed that if something was written down, it could be understood. But now the words seemed like another language. Richard explained each section. I listened carefully. The more he explained, the more uncomfortable I became. There were provisions that could potentially give Marcus far more involvement in my finances than I had realized. I looked at Richard. Why would he need all this just to pay wedding vendors? Richard didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "That's a question you should ask him." I stared down at the papers. I don't want to believe he intended to take advantage of me. "I understand. He's my son. I know. He isn't a stranger. I know that too." Richard folded his hands on the desk. "But being your son doesn't automatically make him trustworthy with every part of your financial life." I looked away. That sentence hurt, because deep down I knew it was true. Richard then asked me something unexpected. "Imani, what do you want?" I looked back at him. "What do you mean? What do you want to happen with your money?" I thought about it. "I want to help my son." He nodded. "And I want to remain independent. And I don't want to be afraid of running out of money." And I took a slow breath. "I want to know that if I live another 20 years, I'll be okay." Richard nodded. "That's what we need to protect." I felt tears rise in my eyes. Not because of the money, because nobody had asked me that question in a long time. What do you want? For years, I had asked what Marcus needed, what James needed, what the family needed, what everyone else needed. I had almost forgotten that I was allowed to have needs too. Richard pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Let's start from the beginning. For the next hour, we reviewed my financial situation, my house, my savings, my retirement income, my monthly expenses, potential future costs, the money I had promised Marcus, everything. For the first time, I saw my financial life as something other than a pile of numbers. It was my future. It was the security James and I had built together. It was the difference between being dependent on my son and remaining independent. When we finished, Richard looked at me. You can help Marcus without giving him control. I nodded slowly. That sounds right. It is. He paused. But you need to make one decision. What decision are you prepared to let him be angry with you? The question hit me harder than anything else. I looked down at my wedding ring. I don't know. Richard's voice remained gentle. Because if you aren't, then no financial plan will protect you. He can pressure you emotionally until you undo everything. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly what he meant. Marcus knew how to make me feel guilty. He knew how to remind me of every sacrifice. He knew how to make his problems feel like my responsibility. Richard continued. You don't have to stop loving your son. I don't want to. You don't have to punish him. I don't. You simply have to stop confusing love with surrender. That sentence stayed with me. Love with surrender. I had never thought of it that way. Before I left, Richard told me to come back the following morning. There are steps we can take to make sure your financial future is protected, he said. What kind of steps? I'll explain everything before you sign anything. I nodded. And I won't tell Marcus, not unless you want me to. I thanked him. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but a little sunlight was beginning to break through. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. My phone rang. Marcus. I stared at his name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but I answered. Hello, Mom. Where are you out? Why? There was a pause. I've been trying to reach you. I was with someone who I didn't answer. He sighed. Mom, we need to fix this. Fix what? The money situation. I closed my eyes. Marcus, I told you I need time. We don't have time. You've known about the wedding for months. That's not the point. What is the point? His voice became tense. I need you to trust me. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I had spent my entire life trusting him. I do trust you, I said quietly. Then sign the papers. I looked through the windshield. No. The silence that followed was absolute. What did you say? I said no. His breathing changed. Mom, I love you. Then why are you doing this? Because I love you. He didn't understand. Maybe I didn't either. Not completely. But I knew I couldn't keep saying yes simply because saying no made him angry. After we hung up, I sat there crying. I wanted my son. I wanted the little boy from the photograph. I wanted the man I believed he had become. But I couldn't keep protecting an image of him while ignoring the person standing in front of me. That evening, Marcus didn't call. Instead, Jasmine did. Her voice was unusually soft. Imani, can we talk? Of course, I don't want there to be any hard feelings. I stayed silent. She continued. Marcus is under a lot of pressure. I understand. He really wants this wedding to be perfect. I know. And I know you're helping. I am. But he says you're reconsidering. I took a breath. I'm reconsidering giving him control of my savings. There was silence. Then Jasmine said, he told me you had agreed. I agreed to help. That's not what he said. I closed my eyes. I can't be responsible for what Marcus told you. Her tone changed. So, you're going to let him fail? No. But you could prevent it. I could also put my own future at risk. She didn't respond. Then she said quietly, I thought you wanted us to be happy. I do. Then why does this feel like you're choosing money over your son? I felt something inside me break. I am not choosing money over my son, I said. I'm choosing not to lose myself trying to make everyone else happy. We ended the call shortly afterward. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. I opened the old photograph again. Marcus was smiling. His little hand was wrapped around my neck. I touched the picture with my fingertips. I still love you, I whispered. But this time, I added something else. I just can't keep saving you by destroying myself. The next morning, I would return to Richard's office, and this time, I wouldn't be there because I was afraid. I would be there because I had finally decided that my future deserved a place in my own family. I didn't know it yet, but before that morning was over, I would sign the documents that Marcus would later desperately wish he had read. And once that ink dried, the balance of power in our family would change forever. The next morning, I drove back to Richard Hayes's office with a strange feeling in my chest. I wasn't as frightened as I had been the day before. I was still nervous, but underneath the nervousness was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. For years, I had believed that keeping peace in my family meant keeping everyone happy. If Marcus needed something, I helped. If he was upset, I apologized. If he made a mistake, I found a way to soften the consequences. I had convinced myself that this was what love looked like. But sitting in my car outside Richard's office, I finally understood that there was a difference between being supportive and becoming responsible for another adult's choices. I walked inside. Richard was waiting for me. He had several folders arranged neatly across his desk. Good morning, Imani. Good morning. He stood and offered me a cup of coffee. I smiled. Thank you. I sat down and looked at the folders. Is this everything? This is everything we need to review. I took a deep breath. Then let's do it. Richard opened the first folder. Before we begin, I want to make something very clear. I looked at him. Nothing happens today unless you understand it and agree to it. I nodded. And you don't need to feel guilty for protecting yourself. Those words made my eyes sting. I looked down at my hands. I keep thinking about Marcus. That isn't surprising. He's going to be angry. He may be. He may think I'm choosing money over him. Richard leaned back. Are you? No. Then don't let his interpretation become your reality. I took a slow breath. Richard began explaining the plan. He spoke carefully without rushing me. The purpose wasn't to punish Marcus. It wasn't to hide money from him. It wasn't even designed because Richard believed Marcus was a bad person. The purpose was much simpler. To make sure that I remained financially secure and in control of decisions concerning my own future. I listened as he explained how my savings, retirement resources, and other financial interests could be structured so that I would remain protected. He discussed my home, my regular expenses, emergency needs. the possibility that I might eventually need additional care. He reminded me that I could live another 20 or 30 years. I had never thought about that number quite that way before. 30 years. When I was 38, 30 years had seemed like an entire lifetime. At 68, I suddenly understood how quickly time could disappear. Richard had pointed to the documents. These provisions are designed around your needs first. I nodded. And Marcus doesn't lose anything that legally belongs to him. I looked at him. But he can't simply control what belongs to me. Correct. I sat quietly. There was something almost peaceful about hearing that. For the first time, the conversation wasn't about how much I could give Marcus. It was about how much I needed to keep. Richard continued explaining. Some of the paperwork concerned the structure of my financial accounts. Some dealt with protections for my long-term expenses. Other documents established clear boundaries around who could make decisions involving my assets. Every time Richard finished explaining a section, he asked if I understood. Sometimes I asked him to repeat himself. He never made me feel foolish. He would simply start again. When we reached one particular document, I hesitated. What happens if Marcus asks why I did this? You can tell him the truth. What truth? That you are planning for your future. I looked at him. That sounds so simple. It is simple. Then why does it feel so hard? Because you're not making a financial decision alone. I frowned. What do you mean? You're making a financial decision while carrying a mother's heart. That sentence brought tears to my eyes. I looked away. Richard gave me a moment. Then he said quietly, Imani, you don't have to stop being Marcus's mother to start being responsible for yourself. I nodded. I thought about James. If he were sitting beside me, what would he say I knew immediately? He would probably shake his head and say, You've been taking care of everybody for too long. Then he'd tell me to stop worrying about what other people thought. I smiled through my tears. I wish he were here. So do I, Richard said. There was something comforting about hearing James mentioned by someone who had known him. I wiped my eyes. Okay. Richard looked at me. Okay, what? Let's finish. He nodded. We continued through the documents. When we reached the final pages, Richard placed a pen in front of me. I stared at it. That little pen suddenly felt heavier than anything I had ever held. I thought about Marcus. I thought about his wedding. I thought about Jasmine. I thought about the money. Then I thought about the woman I had been for most of my life. The woman who had spent decades making sure everyone else had what they needed. I realized I wasn't signing away my love for my son. I wasn't turning my back on him. I wasn't declaring war on my family. I was simply drawing a line around the life I had worked so hard to build. I picked up the pen. Before I sign, I said I want to ask one more thing. Of course, if Marcus had never asked me for this money, would you still recommend these protections? Richard didn't hesitate. Yes, that answer mattered. Because I needed to know I wasn't acting out of anger. I needed to know I wasn't trying to punish Marcus. I was making a decision I should have made regardless. I nodded. Then I signed. One page, then another, then another. My signature looked strangely ordinary at the bottom of each page. Just my name, Imani Carter. But I knew those signatures represented something much bigger. When I finished, Richard gathered the documents. The process will continue from here, he said. You have taken an important step. I looked at him. I feel guilty. That's normal. I thought I would feel relieved. You may feel both. He was right. I felt relieved and heartbroken. Both at the same time. I stood and picked up my purse. Before leaving, I turned toward Richard. Thank you. You're welcome. I walked outside. The morning air was cool. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the sky. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. I opened the message. "Mom, I need the money today. The venue needs the final payment." I stared at those words. A few weeks earlier, I would have panicked. I would have called him immediately. I would have asked how much he needed. I would have found some way to make it work. But that morning, I simply locked my phone and put it back in my purse. I had already made my decision. Still, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. When I got home, Marcus was waiting in my driveway. He stepped out of his SUV as soon as he saw me. "Mom." I stopped. "What are you doing here? We need to talk." "I thought we already did. You didn't answer my message." I saw it, and I looked at him. "I told you I couldn't give you the money you wanted." He shook his head. "You don't understand how serious this is." "I understand." "No, you don't." He walked toward me. "The venue is holding our date. If we don't pay today, we lose everything." I felt the old guilt begin to rise. Then I remembered Richard's question. "Are you prepared to let him be angry with you?" I looked at my son. "Yes," I said quietly. He blinked. "What I said? I'm sorry you're under pressure." He waited. "But I'm not changing my decision." His face hardened. "Why? Because I have to protect my future." He stared at me as though I had spoken another language. Then he laughed bitterly. "Your future?" "Yes. You're acting like I'm some stranger." "No," I said. "I'm acting like you're an adult." That stopped him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Marcus said, "Fine." He turned toward his car. Then he looked back. "You're going to regret this." I watched him drive away. My hands were trembling. I went inside and closed the door. Then I leaned against it and cried. Not because I thought I had made the wrong decision, because making the right decision sometimes hurts just as much as making the wrong one. That afternoon, I called Richard. "I did it," I told him. "You did." He came to my house. "Are you okay?" "I think so." There was a pause. Then I asked Richard what happens now. He answered calmly. "Now you let the documents do what they were designed to do." I didn't understand how important those words would become. Marcus believed the next step was simple. He believed I would eventually surrender. He believed his mother would always bend. What he didn't know was that the person he was about to confront was no longer the woman who had spent her entire life saying yes. And the most important thing he didn't know was that the papers he had been so certain I would sign for him were not the papers I had signed that morning. He had never asked. He had never checked. And by the time he realized that it would already be too late to change what I had done. The day after I signed the documents, I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, I lay still in the darkness, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Then I remembered. The papers, Richard's office, my signature, Marcus standing in my driveway, the threat in his voice. "You're going to regret this." I turned toward the window. The sky was beginning to lighten. I expected to feel terrified. Instead, I felt strangely calm. Not happy, not victorious, just calm. I got out of bed, made a coffee, and stood in the kitchen, exactly where Marcus and I had argued days earlier. The same table, the same chairs, the same walls, but I felt different. I had spent so many years believing that peace meant avoiding conflict, that if someone I loved was angry, I needed to find a way to make things right. But sometimes, Peace comes after you stop running from the truth. I had finally accepted that Marcus might be angry with me. What I hadn't accepted was how far he was willing to go. At around 9 that morning, my phone rang. Marcus. I stared at the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello, Mom. His voice was tight. I need you to call the bank. Why they said there's a problem. I already knew what he meant. What kind of problem they won't process the transfer. I took a sip of coffee. Maybe you should ask them why. I did, and they said I don't have the authorization. I remained silent. Mom. Yes, you changed something. I looked out the window. I made some changes to my financial arrangements. What changes concerning my future. His breathing became heavier. What does that mean? It means I decided I need to protect myself. You did this behind my back. I did this for myself. You knew I needed that money. I knew you wanted it. I told you the wedding depends on it. I closed my eyes. Marcus, your wedding is not my financial responsibility. He didn't answer. Then he said something that sounded almost like a whisper. Mom, please. That word used to have the power to break me. Please. When Marcus was 7, it meant he wanted another bedtime story. When he was 16, it meant he wanted to borrow the car. When he was 22, it meant he needed help with tuition. Now it meant something very different. It meant he wanted access to money I had spent my entire life saving. I love you, I said. Then help me. I have helped you. Not enough. I felt something inside me settle. I can't keep doing this. He hung up. I sat at the table for several minutes. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was Jasmine. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello, Imani. What did you do? Her voice was sharp. I beg your pardon. Marcus says you changed everything. I made financial decisions about my own money. You knew the wedding was depending on that. I knew Marcus wanted the money. That isn't fair. I felt my voice become quieter. Jasmine, I have tried to be supportive. You could still fix this. No. She was silent. Why? Because I have to live with the consequences too. She sighed. I don't think you understand how much this means to us. I understand. Then why won't you help? I already did. But you have more. There it was again. That sentence. You have more. As though the amount I had saved somehow determined how much I owed them. I looked at the photograph of James sitting on the shelf. I have more because I saved it. She didn't respond. I worked for it. I continued. I planned for it. I sacrificed for it. And I am allowed to keep enough to feel safe. Her voice softened. I thought you wanted to be part of our future. I do. Then why are you making this so difficult? Because your future cannot depend on destroying mine. She hung up. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking, but I didn't regret what I had said. Later that afternoon, I received another call from Richard. How are you holding up? I've had better days. He chuckled softly. I imagine. Marcus knows something changed. He was bound to notice eventually. I don't think he understands. He doesn't have to understand your decision for it to be valid. I leaned back in my chair. Richard, I keep wondering if I went too far. You didn't, but he's my son. I know. What if he never forgives me? Richard was quiet for a moment. Imani, forgiveness is not something you can purchase with your financial security. That sentence stayed with me. I thanked him. Then I asked, what happens if he challenges everything? We'll respond appropriately. Could he? He can ask questions. He can disagree. But disagreement doesn't erase documents. I felt a small sigh of relief. Then Richard said something that surprised me. You know what concerns me most? What, that you still think you're the one who has done something wrong? I didn't answer, because he was right. Somewhere inside me, I still felt guilty. Marcus had made me feel like a selfish mother, simply because I wanted to keep my own savings. That evening, Denise came over. She brought a casserole and 2 slices of peach pie. She put them on my kitchen counter. Eat. I smiled. I'm not hungry. That's not what I asked. I laughed for the first time in days. We sat at the table. I told her about Marcus's calls. Denise shook her head. Did he ask how you were? No. Did Jasmine ask? No. Did either of them ask whether you're sleeping? No. Then what did they ask? I looked down. Money. Denise nodded. That's your answer. I hated that she was right. That night, after Denise left, I went through some old boxes in the closet. I found photographs. Marcus's first birthday. His high school graduation. His college graduation. James holding him at the hospital. My son's wedding announcement. I stopped. The irony was almost painful. Wedding. The word that had once made me happy now made my stomach tighten. I sat on the floor with the photographs around me. Then I found something else. A handwritten note from James. It had been tucked inside an old financial folder. I recognized his handwriting immediately. It said, "Whatever happens, make sure Imani is taken care of." I stared at those words. James had written them years ago. Maybe he had been talking about something completely different. Maybe it was a simple reminder. But that night, it felt like he was speaking directly to me. I pressed the note against my chest. I'm trying, I whispered. The next morning, Marcus showed up again. This time, he didn't wait for me to invite him inside. He walked through the doorway. Mom, we need to settle this. I stepped aside. Come in. He sat down. I remained standing. What do you want? I want you to reverse what you did. I can't. You can. No. He pulled out his phone. Look. He showed me an email from the wedding venue. The final payment was overdue. I looked at the amount. It was enormous. My heart sank. Marcus, I told you. This is too much. I know. Why did you agree to this? Because I thought you'd help. I looked at him. You thought I'd pay for all of this. I thought you'd help me if I needed you. I already helped. You promised. I promised to help with the wedding. I never promised to sacrifice my entire future. His face tightened. Why are you suddenly acting like this? I'm not suddenly acting like anything. Yes, you are. He stood. You've changed. I looked at my son. No, Marcus. My voice was quiet. I've finally stopped pretending. He stared at me. Neither of us spoke. Then he said, What exactly did you sign? My heart skipped. I thought about Richard, about the documents, about the morning I had sat in that office and signed page after page. I looked directly at my son. You should have asked me that before you asked me to sign your papers. His expression changed. What does that mean? It means you never really cared what I was signing. That isn't true. You didn't read them. I trusted you. No, I said gently. You trusted that I would do whatever you wanted. His face went pale. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. He realized there was something he didn't know. Something he should have known. Something he had never bothered to ask about. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Mom. I waited. Did you do something to the money? I looked at him. I protected my future. He stared at me for several seconds. Then he walked out. The door closed. I stood there, listening to his footsteps disappear. And for the first time, I knew the moment of truth was coming. Marcus had believed the story was simple. His mother had savings. He needed money. She would eventually say yes. But he had missed the most important part. I was no longer making decisions from fear, and the papers I had signed that morning were about to become the one thing he had never expected. By the following Monday, the wedding had become a storm that seemed to reach every corner of my life. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Marcus called. Jasmine called. Even a woman from the wedding venue called once asking whether I could help resolve a payment issue. I didn't know how she had gotten my number. I didn't ask. I simply told her I'm not responsible for the wedding payments. She apologized and ended the call. But the pressure didn't stop. Marcus came to my house again that afternoon. This time, he wasn't angry when he walked through the door. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red, and he had the kind of expression I remembered from when he was a teenager and had made a serious mistake. For a moment, my heart softened. "Marcus," I said, "are you okay?" He looked at me. "Not really." I stepped aside. "Sit down." He sat at the kitchen table. I made him coffee. It was an old habit. No matter how angry we were with each other, I still wanted to take care of him. I placed the mug in front of him. He didn't touch it. The venue gave us until Friday. I nodded. I heard how they called me. His head lifted. "They called you, yes. I didn't tell them to." "I know." He rubbed his face. "Mom, I don't know what to do." That was the first honest thing he had said to me in days. I sat across from him. "Maybe you need to reconsider the wedding." He looked at me as though I had suggested canceling his entire life. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because everything is already booked." "Then change it." "It's not that simple." "It can be." He shook his head. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." He looked down at the table. "I promised Jasmine." "What did you promise that she would have the wedding she wanted? And how are you planning to pay for it?" He didn't answer. I already knew. With my money. He finally looked at me. "I thought you would help." "I did, but I thought—" "What?" He swallowed. "I thought if it came down to it, you'd give me the rest." I stared at him. There was no anger in his voice now, only disappointment. But I realized something. He wasn't disappointed that I had been hurt. He was disappointed that I had finally become difficult to control. I reached across the table. "Marcus, listen to me." He looked up. "I am not trying to destroy your wedding." "Then help me save it. I can't save something you built without knowing whether you could afford it." He looked away. I continued. "You made promises based on money you didn't have." "I thought I had it." "No. You thought I had it." He closed his eyes. I could see the truth settling into him. For several seconds, the kitchen was silent. Then he asked, "What did you sign?" I remembered the question from the day before. I had avoided answering. This time, I said, Documents to protect my financial future." He looked confused. From me, I took a breath. "From anyone? That sounds like you don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone with control over my future." He stared at me. Then his voice became quiet. But I'm your son. I know. You should trust me more than anyone. I should be able to love you without giving you control of my money. He didn't answer. His eyes filled with tears. For 1 second, I saw the little boy again. The boy with the blue backpack. The boy who had held my hand outside kindergarten. I wanted to reach across the table and make everything disappear. I wanted to tell him I would fix it. I wanted to write a check. I wanted to hear him say, "Thanks, Mom." But then I remembered what happened the night I overheard him. She'll give in. She always does. I couldn't go back to being that woman. Not anymore. Marcus finally picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He took one sip and grimaced. "I'm sorry." The words were so unexpected that I didn't know what to say. "For what?" "For putting you in this position." I looked at him carefully. "Do you mean that?" He nodded. "I do." I wanted to believe him. Maybe part of me still did. But then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Jasmine. He didn't answer. The phone stopped, then rang again. He silenced it. "She doesn't know what happened," he said. "Tell her." "I will." He stood. "I need to go." "Marcus." He turned. "You can still have a beautiful wedding." He gave me a sad smile. "Not the wedding she wanted. Maybe that's the problem." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he left. I watched his car disappear. I wanted to believe that conversation had changed something. But that evening, I learned it hadn't. At 7:30, Jasmine arrived at my house. She was wearing a cream-colored coat and carrying a designer handbag. She stood on my porch with tears in her eyes. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the living room. "I don't understand why you're doing this." I closed the door. "I've already explained." "No, you haven't." She turned toward me. "You've changed everything without telling us. I made decisions about my own finances. You knew Marcus was depending on you. I knew he wanted help. He told me you promised. I promised to help. He said you would pay the rest if necessary." I stared at her. I never made that promise. She looked away. For a moment, I felt sorry for her. Then she said something that changed the way I saw everything. "Do you know what people are going to think if we have to cancel parts of the wedding?" I blinked. "People?" "Yes. Jasmine, this is your marriage." "I know. Then why does everyone else's opinion matter so much?" She didn't answer. Instead, she began crying. "I've dreamed about this my whole life. I understand. I just wanted one perfect day, and I wanted to be able to afford my own life." She looked at me. "I never meant to hurt you. I know. But Marcus is desperate. I know. Then please." She took a step toward me. "Please give him the money." I shook my head. "No." Her face changed. "You really won't know." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she wiped her tears. "Marcus said you would eventually give in." My stomach tightened. I looked at her. "What did you say?" "He said you always do." The room seemed to become very quiet. I thought about the night I had overheard those same words. She hadn't realized what she had revealed. I didn't react. I simply said, "Thank you for being honest." She looked confused. "Why?" "Because now I understand. Understand what? That this was never just about the wedding." She shook her head. "I don't know what you mean. It was about whether I would say no." She looked down. Then she quietly said I should go. I opened the door. She walked outside. Before she reached her car, she turned around. I'm sorry. I believed she meant it, but an apology doesn't erase consequences. The next morning, I received a call from the hotel. The final payment had not been made. The representative told me the venue would release the date if the balance wasn't paid by Friday. I thanked her. Then I called Richard. They're releasing the date, possibly. Marcus is going to blame me. He may. I sighed. Richard, I don't want the wedding to fall apart. Then what do you want? I want my son to understand. Understand that he can't build a life by taking mine apart. Richard was silent. Then he said, That's something Marcus has to learn himself. That afternoon, Marcus sent me a message. Mom, I need to see you. I replied, You can come over. He arrived just before sunset. He looked different, older somehow. He sat down across from me. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he pulled a folded document from his jacket. What is this? I recognized it immediately. It was one of the papers he had asked me to sign weeks earlier. I want you to explain this. I looked at it. Why? Because I read it. I felt a strange sadness. You should have read it before asking me to sign. I know. He looked down. I'm sorry. I nodded. He continued, But this isn't what I thought it was. No. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. He looked up. That sentence seemed to hurt him more than anything else I had said. You're right. I sat quietly. He folded the document. I thought you were just going to sign it. I know. I didn't think you'd say no. I know. He looked toward the window. Then he whispered, I didn't think I'd ever have to hear you say no. My eyes filled with tears. That's exactly why I had to. He nodded slowly. Neither of us knew what would happen next. But for the first time, Marcus was no longer standing in my kitchen demanding money. He was sitting across from me, trying to understand why his mother had finally drawn a line. And somewhere beneath the anger, the wedding pressure, and the money, I could feel something beginning to change. I just didn't know yet whether that change would bring my son back to me, or finally show me how far away he had already gone. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Marcus. His voice sounded different. Not angry, not demanding, tired. Mom, I need to talk to you. Not about the money, just about everything. I listened to the message twice. For the first time in weeks, I wondered whether my son was finally beginning to understand what had happened. I called him back. He answered immediately. Hi, Mom. Hi. Can I come over? My son was finally beginning to understand what had happened. I called him back. He answered immediately. Hi, Mom. Hi. Can I come over? Yes. I don't want to argue. Neither do I. He arrived about an hour later. When I opened the door, he was carrying a small cardboard box. I looked at it. What is that? Something I found. He walked into the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Then he sat down. I remained standing. What did you find? He opened the box. Inside were old photographs, cards, and letters. My heart tightened. Where did you get those Dad's things? I sat beside him. Marcus pulled out a photograph. It showed James standing in our backyard, holding a tiny Marcus in his arms. Marcus was laughing. James was looking at him with that expression I remembered so well. The expression of a father who believed his child could do anything. I found this in the storage room, Marcus said. I touched the photograph. Your father loved that picture. I know. We sat quietly. Then, Marcus said, I found something else. He reached into the box and pulled out an old envelope. My name was written on the front. I recognized James's handwriting immediately. What is it? I don't know. He handed it to me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter James had written years before. I read it silently. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some great declaration. It was simply a note, reminding me that if anything ever happened to him, I should never allow anyone to make me feel guilty for protecting the life we had built together. I read it twice. Then I looked at Marcus. Where did you find this? In Dad's old desk. He lowered his eyes. I think I finally understand why you did what you did. I didn't answer. He continued. I thought you were keeping money from me. I wasn't. I know. He rubbed his hands together. I was so focused on the wedding that I stopped thinking about you. That confession hurt, but it was honest. I reached for his hand. He let me hold it. You're my son, I said. I will always want good things for you. I know. Wanting good things for you doesn't mean I have to pay for everything. I know that now. There was a long silence. Then he said, I need to tell you something. I felt my stomach tighten. What? The wedding. What about it? We're going to have to change it. I looked at him. Change what? Everything. He explained that the venue had given them one final deadline. The remaining balance was too large. Marcus had already borrowed money from a friend. He had put some expenses on credit cards. He had delayed payments to several vendors. He couldn't keep going. So, what are you going to do? I asked. Jasmine wants to cancel. I was surprised. She does? He nodded. She says she's embarrassed. I sighed. Marcus. I know. He looked down. She said she doesn't want people thinking we couldn't afford our own wedding. I shook my head. That's exactly the problem. He gave me a sad smile. I know. For the first time, I saw how exhausted he was. Not just financially, emotionally. He had spent months trying to create an image that couldn't survive without someone else's money. And now that I had stepped away, the image was collapsing. Do you still want to marry her? I asked. Marcus looked at me. Yes, then maybe you don't need the wedding you planned. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. He told me he and Jasmine had discussed a much smaller ceremony. A local church, close family, a simple reception, nothing extravagant, no ballroom, no giant floral arrangements, no expensive honeymoon. It would be modest. It would also be affordable. I smiled. That sounds beautiful. He looked surprised. You're not disappointed, no. Why? Because marriage isn't a performance. He looked down. I wish I'd understood that earlier. So do I. He laughed softly. For the first time in weeks, I saw a little of my old son again. Then his expression changed. There is one more thing. What? He hesitated. I owe you an apology. I waited. He looked directly into my eyes. I was counting your money. I didn't move. I know. I mean it, Mom. I was. He swallowed. I knew roughly how much you had. I knew what you had in savings. I knew what the house was worth. My chest tightened. How did you know? You mentioned things over the years? And I kept track. The honesty was painful. Why? Why? He looked ashamed. Because I started thinking about what I might inherit someday. The room went silent. I had expected many things, but hearing my son admit that he had already imagined my death as part of his financial future was different. It cut deeper than the wedding. Marcus! I know how terrible that sounds. I couldn't speak. He continued. I never wanted you to die. I know. But I started thinking about what would happen when you were gone. And then I started thinking about what could happen sooner if you helped me now. I looked away. That was the moment I understood the real danger. It hadn't started with the wedding. The wedding had simply exposed it. For Marcus, my money had slowly stopped being something I owned. It had become something he expected to receive eventually. And once he started expecting it, my refusal felt like theft. He wiped his eyes. I hate that I became that person. I looked at him. Then don't stay that person. He nodded. I don't want to. I reached across the table. He took my hand. We sat that way for a while. Then he said, There's something else you need to know. I looked up. What Jasmine knew. My hand went still. Knew what? That I was counting on your savings. I felt a coldness spread through me. She knew, yes. How long? Months. I pulled my hand away. Did she know about the paperwork? Marcus shook his head. No. She thought you'd eventually give us the money. My heart sank. I remembered her conversations, the tears, the pressure, the words about what people would think. Suddenly, everything made sense. She hadn't necessarily planned to steal from me, but she had been willing to benefit from my silence, and Marcus had allowed it. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed. I looked at him. You should have told me the truth. I know. He stood. I understand if you don't forgive me. I looked at my son. I forgive you. His eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. I understand. And it doesn't mean I'll hand you my savings. I don't want that anymore. I studied his face. Are you sure? He nodded. I want to fix this myself. Those words meant more to me than any promise about money ever could. He hugged me. I held him tightly. For a moment, I felt like the mother holding her little boy again. But then he pulled away. I need to go, where I have to talk to Jasmine. I nodded. Be honest with her. I will. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. Mom? Yes? Thank you for saying no. I stared at him. What? He smiled sadly. If you had given me the money, I might never have learned this. Then he left. I stood in the doorway long after his car disappeared. I wanted to believe the worst was over. But that evening, I received a phone call from Richard. Imani, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. My stomach tightened. Why? There is something you need to know. What happened? I'd rather explain it in person. Is it about Marcus? Yes. I sat down. Is he in trouble? Richard paused. Not exactly. Then what is it? Another pause. Bring the documents I gave you. My heart began racing. Richard, you're frightening me. I don't mean to. Then tell me. He sighed. There may be an issue concerning one of the documents Marcus asked you to sign. I looked toward the kitchen table. The folder was still there. What kind of issue? I want you to hear the explanation from me before you hear anything from anyone else. I couldn't speak. Richard. Yes. Did Marcus know what was in those papers? I don't know. But you said there was something I needed to understand. There is. I looked at the photograph of James. The calm I had felt that morning suddenly disappeared. For weeks, I had thought the biggest danger was losing my savings. Now I realized there might be something else hidden inside the paperwork, something Marcus had never explained, something I had never seen. And if Richard was calling me back to his office, it meant the story was far from over. The next morning, I would finally learn why the papers Marcus had asked me to sign mattered far more than either of us had realized. I barely slept that night. Richard's words kept circling through my mind. There may be an issue concerning one of the documents Marcus asked you to sign. I kept thinking about the folder Marcus had brought into my kitchen, the pages he had pushed toward me, the way he had said, "Just sign here." At the time, I had assumed the danger was simply that he wanted access to my savings. Now I wondered whether there had been something else. Something I had missed. Something Marcus himself might not have understood. The next morning, I drove to Richard's office. He was waiting for me in the conference room. There were several folders on the table. I sat down. "Richard, please tell me what's going on." He closed the door. "I received some information yesterday that concerns me." "What information?" "Your son submitted a document connected to one of the wedding arrangements." I frowned. "What kind of document?" "A financial guarantee." My stomach dropped. "Whose guarantee? Yours?" I stared at him. Richard slid a copy across the table. I picked it up. At first, the words seemed blurry. Then I recognized my name. My full legal name. Imani Carter. My hands began to tremble. "What is this?" "It appears to be a document representing that you agreed to guarantee certain wedding-related obligations. I never signed this." Richard nodded. "I know." I looked at him. "Then how is my name on it?" "That is what we're trying to determine." I read the page again. There was language about responsibility for certain payments if Marcus and Jasmine failed to meet their obligations. The amount wasn't small. It was large enough that if the agreement were legitimate, it could have created a serious problem for me. I looked at Richard. "Did Marcus sign this?" "Yes." "And my signature?" "It appears electronically." My heart pounded. "I didn't authorize that." "I know." I sat back. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I whispered, "He used my name." Richard nodded carefully. "We don't yet know exactly how." I closed my eyes. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Marcus had misunderstood something. Maybe someone at the venue had made an error. Maybe the document had been generated incorrectly. But deep down, I knew this was more serious. Why would he do this? Richard looked at me. "That is something you need to ask him." I shook my head. "I don't understand." "You don't have to understand his motives to protect yourself." He explained that the document needed to be formally disputed. I listened carefully. There would be notices, records, correspondence. The situation would need to be documented. Richard made it clear that I should not confront anyone emotionally or make accusations I couldn't support. "Everything needs to be in writing," he said. I nodded. "Will Marcus be told?" "He may be." I stared at the document. "I can't believe he did this." Richard's voice softened. "Imani, don't make a conclusion before we know all the facts." I looked at him. "You're saying I shouldn't assume my son forged it. I'm saying we should separate what we know from what we suspect." I nodded slowly. "What do we know?" "We know your name appears on a financial guarantee you say you never signed. And what do we suspect that someone represented you as agreeing to something you didn't agree to? I looked down. The distinction mattered, but emotionally, it was almost impossible to separate. My son had already admitted he had been counting my money. Now my name was attached to a document I had never seen. I thought about the morning he asked me to sign his papers. Maybe he had been testing me. Maybe he had been trying to see how carefully I read things. Maybe he had assumed that because I loved him, I wouldn't question anything. I felt tears forming. Richard handed me a tissue. I'm sorry. I wiped my eyes. I keep asking myself where I went wrong. He shook his head. Don't do that. But I raised him. You raised a child. You didn't control the adult he became. That sentence broke something open inside me. I cried quietly. Richard gave me time. When I finally calmed down, I asked, "What happens now?" "We challenge the document, and the wedding, that is no longer your responsibility." I nodded. I understood that, but I still wanted to know the truth. "I need to talk to Marcus." "Then talk to him calmly." "I will. Don't threaten him." "I won't." "Don't accuse him of forgery unless you have evidence." "I won't." "Ask him one question." "What question? Did he authorize anyone to use your name?" I nodded. I wrote it down. When I left Richard's office, I called Marcus. He answered immediately. "Mom, we need to talk." He was quiet. "Is this about the wedding?" "No." "Then what I want you to come to my house." "Okay." He arrived 40 minutes later. The moment he walked through the door, I knew he could tell something was wrong. What happened? I placed the document on the table. He looked at it. His face changed instantly. "Where did you get that, Richard?" Marcus picked it up. He read the first page, then the second. His hands began shaking. "Mom, did you authorize anyone to use my name?" He looked at me. "No. Are you sure?" "Yes. Did you submit this?" He swallowed. "I submitted the wedding financing paperwork." "Did you submit this document? I don't remember seeing this exact page." "Marcus, I swear." I watched him carefully. He looked frightened. Not angry, not defensive. Frightened. "Then explain it." "I can't." "Who prepared the paperwork?" "The venue's financing department." "Who did you speak to?" "A man named Kevin." "Kevin who?" "Kevin Miller." I wrote the name down. Marcus sat down. "Mom, I didn't forge your signature." "I hope not. I would never do that." I stared at him. "You need to understand why I'm asking." "I do." He looked at the document again. "I thought the paperwork was just about the wedding. Did you tell them I agreed to guarantee the expenses?" He hesitated. "I told them you were helping. That isn't the same thing." "I know. Did you ever tell anyone that I would cover the remaining balance?" He looked down. "I might have." My heart sank. "Might have." "I told them you were my mother and that you had agreed to help." "I agreed to help you." "I didn't agree to guarantee everything." "I know." "Then why did you tell them that?" He rubbed his face. I was desperate. I stared at him. "That doesn't answer the question." He finally looked at me. "I was trying to keep the wedding from collapsing, and you thought my name would solve the problem." "Yes." The honesty hurt. I sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said, "But I didn't sign for you. I believe you." His eyes lifted. "You do? I believe you didn't personally sign that document?" He exhaled. "But you created the situation." He nodded. "I know." I looked at him. "Marcus, this is bigger than your wedding." "I know. You could have put me at legal and financial risk." "I know. Why didn't you come to me?" He looked ashamed. Because I knew you'd say no. That sentence was devastating, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed everything. He had known my answer would be no. So, instead of accepting that answer, he had tried to find another way around it. I looked at him. You didn't need more money. He shook his head. You needed permission. He didn't respond. You needed me to say yes so you could feel like the wedding was still under control. Tears filled his eyes. Yes. I looked away. I don't know how to help you anymore. You don't have to. His voice cracked. I finally understand that. He stood. I'll fix it. How I'll contact the venue. I'll tell them you never agreed to guarantee anything. Good. I'll take responsibility. You need to. He nodded. Then he stopped at the doorway. Mom. Yes, I am sorry. I believed him. But an apology wasn't enough. Not yet. He left. I called Richard immediately. He says he didn't sign it. What did he say? He admitted he told the venue I had agreed to help. Richard was silent. That matters, he said. What happens now? We document his statement. And then we find out how your name ended up on that document. I sat down. For the first time, I understood that the wedding was no longer the center of the story. The money wasn't either. The real issue was trust. My son had crossed a line because he believed love would protect him from consequences, and now those consequences were finally arriving. That evening, Marcus called me again. His voice was quiet. Mom. Yes, I talked to Kevin. What did he say? He said he thought you had authorized everything. How? Marcus hesitated. He said, I gave him your information. I closed my eyes. What information? Your name, your address, some account details. My heart stopped. You gave a stranger my financial information. I thought it was necessary for the paperwork. Marcus, I know. No, I don't think you understand. I felt my voice trembling. You didn't just ask me for money. You exposed me. There was silence. Then Marcus whispered, I'm sorry. I hung up. I walked to the window. Outside, the evening was peaceful. Children were riding bicycles down the street. A neighbor was watering her lawn. Everything looked ordinary. But my life no longer felt ordinary. My son had not stolen my savings. Not yet. But he had come dangerously close to putting my name, my security, and my future into the hands of people I didn't know. And now, there was only one question left. Who had actually put that signature on the document? Because if Marcus was telling the truth, someone else had done it. And whoever that person was, had a reason. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that I never drank. I kept staring at the same piece of paper. The financial guarantee. My name, my address, information about my accounts, and a signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone who didn't know me. I had spent my entire career working with numbers and records. I knew how important a signature could be. A signature meant consent. A signature meant responsibility. A signature meant that someone had made a decision and was willing to stand behind it. I had not signed that document, yet someone had decided my name belonged on it. I called Richard. I need you to tell me what happens next. We start with the records. What records? Everything connected to the document. Emails, application history, timestamps, electronic records, communications with the venue, and anything else showing how your information was submitted. I took a breath. And if we find out who did it, then we'll know what we're dealing with. His calmness helped me, but inside, I was terrified. Not just because of what could happen legally. I was terrified because I was beginning to understand how little I had known about my son's financial situation. For years, Marcus had made himself look successful. He wore expensive suits. He drove a newer vehicle. He took Jan to nice restaurants. He talked about investments. He had convinced me that he was building a stable life. But now I was starting to see the truth. He wasn't building. He was borrowing. Borrowing against credit cards. Borrowing from friends. Borrowing from the future. And eventually trying to borrow from me. Richard asked me to meet him later that afternoon. When I arrived, he had already gathered several documents. "There is something you need to see." He handed me a printed email. It was from the hotel's financing department. I read it slowly. The message referred to parental financial support and guaranteed family assistance. My stomach tightened. Where did they get this information? Richard pointed to the bottom. There. I looked at the sender information. The message had been forwarded several times. Then I saw a name. Kevin Miller, the man Marcus had mentioned. Who is he? He appears to have handled the financing paperwork for the wedding. Is he with the hotel? Yes. Then why would he put my name on anything? Richard looked at me. That is what we need to determine. He gave me another document. This one contained a timeline. Marcus had submitted financial information several weeks earlier. Then, after the venue questioned whether the couple could meet the remaining balance, additional information had been provided. My information. I felt sick. When was this? Richard pointed to the date. It was the same week Marcus had first asked me how much money I had. I closed my eyes. The memory came back immediately. We had been sitting at my dining table. He had asked about my bank, my savings, whether I was comfortable. At the time, I had thought he was simply curious. He wasn't. He had already been thinking ahead. I looked at Richard, so he knew this was coming. Possibly. But why did the venue accept this? Because they apparently believed you had agreed to support the wedding financially. I shook my head. I never said that. I know. Richard slid another page toward me. This is where things become important. I read the document. It contained a statement attributed to Marcus. It said that his mother had agreed to provide financial assistance if necessary. I looked up. He said that it appears so. My heart sank. I wasn't surprised anymore, but I was disappointed. Deeply. He told them I agreed. Yes, but he didn't have my permission. No. I stared at the paper. Then what about the signature? Richard pointed to the electronic record. The signature was entered after this statement. By whom? We don't know yet. I felt a wave of anger. Not the hot anger I had felt when Marcus demanded my savings. This was colder, more painful. Someone had taken a boundary I had clearly drawn and simply erased it. Richard noticed my expression. Imani, I want you to hear something carefully. I looked at him. You did the right thing by refusing to sign Marcus's documents. I nodded. If you had signed them without understanding them, this situation could have been much worse. I swallowed. How much worse, I don't want to speculate. I appreciated that. Richard never frightened me unnecessarily. He dealt in facts, and the facts were already frightening enough. That evening, Marcus came to my house. He looked exhausted. He sat at the kitchen table. I talked to Kevin again. What did he say? He said he believed I had authority to provide the information. Why? Because I told him you were helping. I looked at him. Helping isn't the same as giving you permission to use my financial information. I know. Did you ever tell him I had authorized the guarantee? Marcus hesitated. I said you would probably help. I closed my eyes. Probably I didn't think it would become this. That is exactly the problem. He looked down. I thought I could fix everything before you found out. Why? Because I was embarrassed. I stared at him. You were embarrassed about what? How much debt I had. The room became silent. How much? He didn't answer. Marcus, almost $70,000. I felt as though the air had been pulled out of the room. 70,000? He nodded. How credit cards, business expenses, some personal loans? I stared at him. And the wedding? He swallowed. About 35,000 more. I couldn't speak. For months, I had believed he needed help paying for a wedding. The truth was much larger. He had already been drowning before the wedding began. The wedding had simply pushed him deeper. Why didn't you tell me I was ashamed? You could have told me. I knew you'd worry. I am your mother. I'm supposed to worry. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. That sentence broke my heart. Because suddenly, I understood something. Marcus hadn't necessarily started this because he was greedy. He had started it because he was terrified of looking unsuccessful. But fear didn't excuse what he had done. It only explained it. You should have come to me, I said. I know. You should have canceled the wedding. I know. You should have told Jasmine the truth. I know. And you should never have used my information. I know. He covered his face with his hands. I ruined everything. I reached across the table. You made serious mistakes. He looked at me. That isn't the same thing as being ruined. He wiped his eyes. Can I still fix it? Yes. His expression changed. But you have to fix it yourself. He nodded. I will. I told him that the wedding needed to be reduced. The debts needed to be addressed. The venue needed to be informed that I had not agreed to guarantee anything. And most importantly, he needed to stop pretending. No more appearances. No more expensive promises. No more using someone else's money to maintain an image. He listened. Then he said something unexpected. I'll call Jasmine tonight. What will you tell her the truth? I nodded. Good. He stood. Before leaving, he turned toward me. Mom, yes? Yes, if I had gotten the money from you, I would have paid everything. I know. But then I'd still owe you. I looked at him. No. He frowned. You would have owed yourself. He didn't understand. I continued. You would have spent my money solving a problem you created. Then you would have had to live with the knowledge that your wedding existed because your mother sacrificed her security. His eyes filled with tears again. I don't want that. Then don't do it. He nodded. After he left, I sat alone for a long time. I felt exhausted, but I also felt something else. Pity. Not the kind of pity that excuses bad behavior. The kind that comes when you finally understand how afraid someone has been. Marcus had spent years trying to become the man he thought everyone expected him to be. A successful businessman, a provider, a husband with an impressive wedding, a man who never needed help. And when reality didn't match the image he had reached for the easiest solution. My savings. But he had forgotten something. A mother can help you survive a mistake. She cannot live your life for you. The following morning, Richard called. We found something. My heart began pounding. What? The electronic signature was submitted from a device associated with the wedding office. I sat up straight. So Marcus didn't sign it. Not according to the records we have. Then who did? We're still investigating. Richard? I know. Does Marcus know? Not yet. I stared out the window. The mystery was finally narrowing. Someone at the wedding office had used my information. And now there was a record showing where the signature had been submitted. But there was still one missing piece. Who had authorized the person at that office to do it? And when Richard gave me the answer later that day, I would realize that the wedding had involved far more deception than I had ever imagined. Richard asked me to come to his office that afternoon. His voice on the phone had been unusually serious. We have more information. I knew immediately that whatever we had discovered was not going to be easy to hear. When I arrived, Richard was standing beside the conference table with several pages spread across it. He didn't ask me to sit right away. Instead, he looked at me and said, "We know where the electronic signature originated." I swallowed. From the wedding office? Yes. So someone there signed my name. That is what the records indicate. I sat down slowly. Who? Richard placed one page in front of me. The name was Kevin Miller. I stared at it. The financing coordinator. Yes. Why would he do that? That is the question. Richard explained that Kevin had apparently been working under pressure from the venue management because the wedding balance was overdue. Marcus had provided information showing that his mother was financially supporting the wedding. But Kevin had gone further. I had prepared paperwork indicating that I had agreed to guarantee the remaining obligations. I shook my head. Why would he believe that? Because Marcus told him you had agreed. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Marcus had not personally forged the signature, but his words had created the foundation for someone else to do it. He had told the truth in the most dangerous way possible. Just enough truth to make a lie believable. He had been helping his mother. I had agreed to help. But he had never had permission to use my identity as security for his promises. Richard continued. There is another issue. I looked at him. What Kevin didn't act completely alone. My heart sank. Who else? Richard slid another document across the table. A supervisor had reviewed the application. That supervisor had approved the financial guarantee. I stared at the name. Did they know the signature wasn't mine? We don't know whether they knew, but they should have verified it. Yes. I sat back. For a moment, I felt overwhelmed. This had started with a wedding. A simple request for money. Now there were financial records, electronic signatures, and people using my personal information. I thought about how easily everything could have gone wrong. If I had signed Marcus's original paperwork without reading it, I might never have discovered the problem until the debt was already attached to me. The thought made me shudder. Richard noticed. This is why you came to see me. I nodded. I thought I was protecting myself from my son. You were protecting yourself from a situation. I looked at him. And now we make sure the record is corrected. I signed the necessary notices. Everything was handled carefully. No accusations, no threats, just facts. I had never been a woman who wanted revenge. I didn't want Kevin fired. I didn't want the hotel destroyed. I didn't want Marcus humiliated. I wanted my name removed from something I had never agreed to. That was all. But before I left, Richard stopped me. There is one more thing. I turned. What? We received a message from the venue. What did they say? They want to speak with you directly. Why they've reviewed the records. I felt nervous. Do they think I owe them money? No. Then what? They want to apologize. I didn't know how to feel about that. An apology couldn't erase what had happened, but I agreed to meet them. The meeting took place the following morning. The hotel manager, a woman named Patricia Lewis, was waiting with Kevin. When I walked into the room, Kevin immediately stood. He looked nervous, much younger than I had imagined. He couldn't have been more than 40. Patricia introduced herself. Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. I nodded. Kevin looked at me. I'm sorry. I said nothing. He continued. I made a serious mistake. What exactly did you do? His eyes dropped. I processed the guarantee based on the information Marcus provided. Did you create the electronic signature? He swallowed. Yes. My chest tightened. You signed my name, I entered the signature electronically. You had no authorization. I thought I did. You thought, he looked ashamed. Marcus told me you had approved it, and you didn't verify it. No. I stared at him. You could have put me in financial danger. I know. Patricia interrupted. We accept responsibility for the failure in our process. I looked at her. Will my name be removed? Removed, yes. Immediately, yes. Will you confirm that in writing? Yes. I nodded. That was all I wanted. Then Kevin said something unexpected. Mr. Carter's son didn't ask me to forge your signature. I looked at him. I know. He only told me you had agreed. I nodded. That doesn't excuse what you did. No, but I want to be clear about that. I appreciated his honesty. When I left the hotel, I felt strangely empty. I had expected anger. Instead, I felt sadness. Because the situation had become so much bigger than a wedding. On the drive home, I called Marcus. Can you come over? He arrived that evening. I told him everything. He listened silently. When I finished, he covered his face. I never told Kevin to sign for you. I know. I swear. I believe you. He looked at me. Then why do I still feel like I did it? Because your decisions created the situation. He nodded. I know. He sat down. For a while he said nothing. Then he whispered, I wanted people to think I had everything under control. I know. I wanted Jasmine to think I could give her the life she wanted. I know. I wanted Dad to be proud of me. My heart broke. Your father would have been proud of you for telling the truth. Marcus began crying. I should have told you. Yes, I should have asked for help. Yes, I should never have touched your information. No. He looked at me. Can you forgive me? I reached for his hand. I already told you I forgive you. He cried harder. But I need you to understand something. He nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase boundaries. I understand. You have to rebuild trust. I will. How, I don't know yet. That is okay. For the first time, he smiled. A small, tired smile. I think I need to start with the truth. Yes. He told me he had spoken to Jasmine. She had been furious. She blamed him for misleading her about their finances. He had admitted everything. The debt, the wedding expenses, my savings, the guarantee, everything. What did she say? I asked. She said she didn't know who I was anymore. I looked down. And what did you say? I told her that maybe she was finally seeing me clearly. That answer surprised me. What happens now? I don't know. Are you still getting married? He hesitated. We're going to wait. I nodded. That's probably wise. He looked toward the photograph of James. I wish Dad were here. So do I. He would tell me to stop pretending. He would. Marcus smiled faintly. Then he stood. I have something for you? He reached into his jacket. It was a small envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check. I looked at him. What is this, for the money you already gave me? I shook my head. Marcus, you don't have to repay me immediately. I know. Then why? Because I want to. I stared at the check. It wasn't for the entire amount. It was only part of it, but I understood what it represented. He was trying, not fixing everything, not magically becoming perfect, just taking responsibility. I handed the check back. Keep it. He looked confused. Why use it to pay your debts? Mom, I don't need it back today, but pay your obligations first. He nodded. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I smiled. This is the last time I'm going to rescue you. He laughed softly. I know. No, Marcus, I mean it. I know. And if you ever need help again, he smiled, I'll ask. And if I say no, I'll respect it. That was the answer I had been waiting to hear. Not I promise I'll never make another mistake. Not I'll pay you back. Just I'll respect it. Because that was what had been missing all along. Respect. That evening, after Marcus left, I sat in the living room with James's photograph. The house was quiet. The wedding was no longer consuming every conversation. My savings were protected. My name would be removed from the guarantee. Marcus was facing his debts, and for the first time, he was facing himself. I thought the crisis was finally ending. I was wrong. The following morning, Marcus called me. His voice was shaking. Mom, there's something else. My heart sank. What? I found out where the original information came from. I stood up. What do you mean? Somebody gave Kevin more than just my application. Who? Marcus hesitated. Then he said a name I never expected to hear. Jasmine. I froze. What? She had copies of your information. My hand tightened around the phone. How? I don't know. Marcus, I swear, Mom, I just found out. I sat down slowly. For weeks, I had believed Jasmine was simply demanding a beautiful wedding. Then I thought she was simply supporting Marcus's bad decisions. Now there was something else. Something much darker. Because if Jasmine had access to my financial information, then the question was no longer just whether Marcus had lied. It was whether someone else had deliberately used what belonged to me. And suddenly, the wedding was no longer only a story about my son taking my savings. It was about how far people were willing to go to get them. For several seconds after Marcus said Jasmine's name, I couldn't speak. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone pressed against my ear, staring at the window. Outside, the neighborhood looked exactly as it always did. A woman walked her dog. A delivery truck passed slowly down the street. Someone was mowing a lawn 2 houses away. Ordinary things. But nothing inside me felt ordinary anymore. Marcus. I finally said, what exactly did you find? I found an email from Jasmine. No, from Kevin. My stomach tightened. What did it say? He said some of the financial information used for the guarantee came from documents Jasmine had provided. I closed my eyes. What documents? I don't know yet. Then find out. I will. There was a pause. Mom. Yes, I should have told you sooner. Yes, you should have. I didn't know. I know. But I should have checked. Yes. He breathed heavily. I don't want to lose you. That sentence broke through my anger. You're not going to lose me because you made a mistake. I was silent. But you could lose my trust if you keep hiding things. I understand. Then find the truth. I will. We ended the call. I immediately called Richard. He answered quickly. Imani Marcus says Jasmine gave someone my financial information. Richard was quiet. Did he say how he found an email? Do you have a copy? Not yet. Don't confront Jasmine until we see it. I wasn't planning to. Good. I took a breath. Richard, if she really had my information, how could she have gotten it? There are several possibilities, such as documents Marcus had access to, information that may have been shared during financial planning, statements or forms. There are many ways information can move between people, but if she deliberately gave it to someone, we'll need evidence before we draw that conclusion. I understood. But my heart had already begun putting pieces together. The questions Marcus had asked me months earlier, the amount of my savings, the questions about the house, the wedding financing, the guarantee, the electronic signature, and now Jasmine. I couldn't stop thinking about something I had once dismissed. Months before the wedding, Jasmine had come to my house while Marcus was at work. We had been drinking tea in the kitchen. She had asked me casual questions about retirement, whether I planned to stay in my house, whether I intended to travel, whether I had enough saved. At the time, I thought she was simply making conversation. Now those questions felt different. I called Marcus again. Did Jasmine ever ask you about my finances? Yes. How often? More than once. What did she ask? He hesitated. She wanted to know whether you had enough saved to help us. My heart sank. Did she know how much approximately? Who told her I did? I closed my eyes. Marcus. I know. You told her yes. Why? Because I thought we were going to be married. I thought she was family. I swallowed. Family doesn't mean access. I understand that now. I wanted to believe him. Then he said, "There's more." I stiffened. What, Jasmine had a copy of one of the financial documents you gave me? Which one? I don't know exactly. I'm trying to find out. I felt cold. Where did she get it? She says I gave it to her. Did you? I don't remember. I leaned back. Then find out. I will. We ended the call. For the rest of the day, I couldn't concentrate. I opened drawers. I checked folders. I went through old financial statements. I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for evidence of what had happened to my information. That was when I noticed something. A folder was missing. It was an old folder I had kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside had been copies of several documents. Not everything, but enough to reveal personal financial information. I searched everywhere. Nothing. My heart began pounding. I called Marcus. Is there a chance you took a folder from my desk? He was quiet. Which folder? I described it. Another pause. I might have. When? A few months ago. Why? You asked me to help organize some paperwork. I don't remember that. I thought you did. Marcus, where is it? I'll look. Now, I will. An hour later, he called. I found it. My heart jumped. Where? In my home office. Is everything inside? I haven't opened it. Don't. He stopped. Why bring it to me? He came that evening. He handed me the folder. I opened it carefully. Several documents were inside. Bank statements, retirement information, a property valuation, insurance paperwork. I felt sick. I looked at Marcus. Did Jasmine see these? He looked ashamed. I don't know. Who had access to your office, Jasmine? Anyone else know? I closed the folder. Then we need to know. Marcus nodded. He looked like a different man. Not the confident son who had once walked into my house demanding money. He looked scared. I'll ask her. No. He looked at me. Why? Because if she did something wrong, I don't want you warning her. Richard had taught me to think carefully. Evidence first. Emotions second. I called him. He told me to bring the folder to his office. The next morning, I did. He examined the documents. Some of these are older than I expected. Does that matter? It tells us when the information could have been accessed. He looked through the pages. Then he stopped. What? He pointed to one statement. This one was copied. I stared at it. How can you tell the original has a notation that isn't present here? I looked closer. He was right. Someone had made a copy of the document. Can we find out when possibly? Richard examined the metadata and records available from the financial institution. After several minutes, he looked up. This copy appears to have been created approximately 6 weeks ago. I felt my chest tighten. 6 weeks. That was after Marcus had asked me for the wedding money. After Jasmine had begun pressuring me. After the wedding plans had accelerated. Does that prove Jasmine copied it? No. But it narrows the timeline. Yes. I nodded. Then let's keep going. Richard contacted the appropriate people. There were more records, more timestamps, more pieces, and eventually one detail stood out. A copy of my financial information had been sent from an email account connected to the wedding planning process. I stared at the screen. Whose email? Richard didn't answer immediately. Then he said, Jasmine's. I felt my stomach drop. So she sent it. The records indicate the document came from her account. I looked at him. Who did she send it to? Kevin Miller. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. There it was. Not a suspicion, not a feeling, a record. Jasmine had sent my financial information to the person who later processed the guarantee. I felt tears sting my eyes. Why, Richard shook his head. We still don't know. I stood. I want to call her. Not yet. Richard, let me explain. He told me that if I confronted her before everything was documented, she could delete messages or change her story. I hated hearing that, because me still wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe she thought I had given permission. Maybe Marcus had told her I agreed. Maybe she believed she was simply helping with paperwork. But then why send the documents herself? Why not ask me? Why not call me? Why not verify? The questions had no easy answers. That evening, Jasmine called me. I stared at her name on the screen. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who had once hugged me and called me Mom. I saw someone who had access to information that belonged to me. I answered. Hello, Imani? Yes, I need to talk to you. About what, Marcus? I waited. He told me everything. Everything about what the wedding. I said nothing. She continued. He told me about the debt. I know. He told me about the guarantee. I know. She began crying. I didn't know things would go this far. I felt my heart sink. What exactly did you know? She went silent. Jasmine, I knew Marcus was desperate. That isn't what I asked. I knew he needed help. Did you have my financial documents? Silence. That silence told me more than words could. Jasmine, I said quietly. Did you send my financial information to Kevin Miller? She began crying harder. I didn't mean to hurt you. My eyes filled with tears. That's not an answer. I thought it would help. Help what? The financing? I closed my eyes. You had no right. I know. You should have asked me. I know. You should never have touched my private information. I know. I felt something inside me break. Not because she had betrayed me, Because I had trusted her. You knew Marcus was struggling. Yes. You knew he couldn't afford the wedding. Yes. And instead of telling me the truth, you used my information. I thought you would say no. There it was. The same fear Marcus had confessed. The same assumption. Everyone had decided that my answer would be no. So they stopped asking. They simply tried to find a way around it. I whispered. You both thought my no didn't matter. She cried. I am sorry. I didn't shout. I didn't insult her. I simply said, you should have been honest. I know. Then I ended the call. I sat alone in the dark living room. The truth was finally clear. Marcus had created the financial crisis. Jasmine had helped hide it. Kevin had processed my information without proper authorization, and I had been expected to clean up the consequences. But now, I knew something else. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life angry. I wasn't going to destroy anyone. I was going to protect myself. And then I was going to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with my son. Because forgiveness was possible, but trust would have to be earned. The next morning, Marcus came to my house. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask me to fix anything. He simply stood at my door and said, Mom, I want to make this right. I looked at him. For the first time, I believed he meant it. But before I could answer, he handed me another envelope. There is something in here you need to see. I opened it. Inside was a letter from the wedding venue. The wedding had been officially canceled. But there was one final issue. A financial claim had been made against the original guarantee. Even though the guarantee was invalid, someone had already attempted to collect against it. And suddenly, I realized the fight wasn't over. It was about to reach its most important moment. I read the letter 3 times before I fully understood what it meant. The wedding had been canceled. The guarantee had been disputed. My financial information had been improperly shared. And yet someone had still attempted to collect money from me. I looked at Marcus. Who made the claim? He shook his head. I don't know. Then why did you bring this to me? Because I didn't want you to find out from someone else. I folded the letter carefully. That's a good start. He lowered his eyes. I know I can't undo what happened. No, but I can stop making it worse. I looked at my son. That was the first time in months I heard something that sounded like maturity rather than desperation. Have you spoken to Jasmine? Yes. And we're not getting married. I nodded slowly. Are you sure? Yes. He looked toward the floor. She said she couldn't trust me. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. You understand the irony? Yes. He swallowed. She said I lied to her about my finances. You did. I know. She lied to you too. He looked up. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said, I don't blame you for not wanting anything to do with her. I don't know what I want yet. He nodded. I understand. I looked at the letter again. What exactly does this claim say? Marcus pulled out another document. The venue's collection department says they were relying on the guarantee. But the guarantee isn't valid. Richard said that. Then why are they still trying? They say the system hasn't been updated. I stared at him. A system doesn't send a claim by itself. I know. That sentence made me uneasy. I called Richard. He answered immediately. Imani, I received the letter. I was expecting it. You knew I knew the venue might attempt collection while the dispute was being processed. I exhaled. What do we do? Nothing on your own. Should I respond, not yet? Why? Because the claim needs to be formally withdrawn. I looked at Marcus. Can the venue do that? Yes. And if they don't, we escalate. I nodded. Richard told me that all communication needed to remain documented. No phone conversations without follow-up records. No emotional arguments. No threats. Just facts. I appreciated that, because inside I was exhausted. I didn't want another fight. I wanted this chapter of my life to end. Later that day, Richard and I submitted the final documentation, showing that I had never authorized the guarantee. The hotel was given copies of the electronic records, the signature information, the email trail, the statement showing Jasmine had sent my financial documents to Kevin. The venue could no longer claim ignorance. Now they had a complete picture. That evening, I sat alone in my living room. I thought about the first time Marcus had asked me for money. I remembered how proud I had felt when he told me he was getting married. I had imagined standing beside him. I had imagined watching him promise his life to someone. I had imagined dancing with my son. Instead, I had spent weeks defending my own name. My phone rang. It was Marcus. Mom, yes, can I come over? Of course. He arrived 20 minutes later. This time, he wasn't carrying paperwork. He wasn't asking for anything. He sat beside me on the couch. I paid the first part of my debt today. I smiled. Good. I sold the car. I looked at him. You didn't have to do that. I did. What will you drive my old car? The one you kept in the garage? Yes. I smiled faintly. That car still works? I know. He laughed. Then he became serious. I also canceled 3 credit cards. That is good. I made a budget. Very good. I've never made one before. I looked at him. That's how you should have started. I know. He looked at his hands. I also told my boss what happened. You told him yes. Why? Because I kept pretending everything was fine. He shook his head. I don't want to live like that anymore. I felt something warm in my chest. Not relief exactly. Hope. You're doing the right thing. He looked at me. Are you proud of me? The question broke my heart. Yes. His eyes filled with tears, even after everything, especially because you're finally taking responsibility. He leaned back. I thought being a man meant never admitting you needed help. I smiled sadly. Being a man means knowing when you need help and having the courage to ask for it. He nodded. I wish I'd understood that sooner. So do I. We sat together quietly. Then he said, I have something else. I smiled. You always have something else. He laughed. This is different. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. What is that? Your spare key? I stared at it. I already have one. I know. He placed it in my hand. I want you to have access to my house. I looked at him. Why? Because I don't want secrets anymore. I closed my fingers around the key. That little piece of metal felt more meaningful than any expensive gift he could have given me. Trust wasn't rebuilt through grand speeches. It was rebuilt through small acts. Transparency, honesty, consistency. I appreciate that I said. He smiled. Then my phone rang. Richard, I answered. Hello, Imani, I have an update. My heart immediately tightened. What happened? The venue has withdrawn the claim. I closed my eyes, completely. I felt tears rush into my eyes. Does that mean I'm done, as far as the venue is concerned? Yes. I exhaled. For the first time in months, my shoulders relaxed. Thank you. You're welcome. Then Richard said something that made me pause. There is one more thing. I looked at Marcus. What the venue has also agreed to provide a written statement acknowledging that the guarantee was submitted without your authorization. I covered my mouth. Really? Yes. Why? Because they want the matter closed. I nodded. That was enough. I thanked him and ended the call. Marcus looked at me. Good news? I smiled. Yes, I told him. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Thank God. We sat quietly. Then Marcus said, Mom, yes, I know this doesn't fix everything. No, but I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to question whether I respect you. I looked at him. That means more than you know. He reached for my hand. I love you. I love you too. That night, after Marcus left, I walked through my house. The rooms felt different, not because anything had changed physically, because the fear was gone. My savings were still mine. My home was still mine. My name was still mine. But more importantly, I had my voice back. For years, I had believed that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left. Now I understood something different. A mother can love her child without financing every decision he makes. A mother can forgive without forgetting. A mother can say no and still leave the door open. I went into the bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept James's letter. I read it one more time. Then I placed it beside the documents Richard had helped me prepare. The old life, the new life, both connected by one simple promise. I would take care of myself. The following Sunday, Marcus invited me to his apartment for dinner. He cooked, actually cooked. There was nothing fancy. Chicken, rice, vegetables, a small pie from the grocery store. But when I sat at his table, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. He showed me the budget he had created, his debt repayment plan, his new savings goal. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't pretending to be. But for the first time, he was honest. I want to build something real, he said. I smiled. You can. He looked at me. And Mom, yes, if I ever ask you for money again. I raised an eyebrow. He laughed. I know. You can say no, and I'll survive. I laughed. That is the answer. We ate dinner. We talked about ordinary things. The weather, work, neighbors, a movie we both wanted to see. No wedding, no debt, no bank accounts, no arguments, just mother and son. Later, as I drove home, I realized something. I had spent months afraid that saying no would destroy my relationship with Marcus. Instead, saying no had forced us to build a relationship based on something stronger than money. Respect. The crisis had cost us a great deal. The wedding was gone. The engagement was over. Trust had been damaged. But something else had been saved. My future, and perhaps more importantly, my son, had finally begun building his own. Still, there was one final thing I needed to do. I returned home, opened the folder of documents from Richard, and looked at the signature I had made that morning. The signature that had started everything. Marcus had assumed that morning was about money. It wasn't. It was about a mother finally deciding that her life mattered too. And as I closed the folder, I realized that the most important thing I had signed that day wasn't a financial document. It was a promise to myself. I would never again confuse love with surrender. And that promise was worth more than every dollar in my savings account. 6 months later, I woke up on a Saturday morning and realized something strange. I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't thinking about the wedding. I wasn't wondering whether Marcus had called the bank. I wasn't checking my phone for another message from the hotel. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in months, I simply woke up. The sunlight came through the curtains. Birds were singing outside. The coffee machine hummed in the kitchen, and my house felt peaceful again. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee. Then I opened the small drawer where I kept James's letter. I had read it so many times that I almost knew every word by heart, but I still read it, not because I was afraid anymore, because it reminded me of who I wanted to be. I had spent years believing that protecting my family meant making sure nobody ever struggled. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes the greatest love you can give someone is allowing them to face the consequences of their choices. Marcus had learned that lesson, and so had I. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Good morning, Mom. Good morning. Are you busy?" "No. What's up? I was wondering if you wanted to have lunch." I smiled. "Of course. I'll pick you up." "You don't have to." "I know." I laughed. "Then come over." He arrived around noon. When I opened the door, he was holding a small paper bag. "What did you bring?" "Bring your favorite pastry." I smiled. "You remembered. I remember everything now." There was something different about him. He looked calmer. Not because his problems had disappeared, but because he had stopped pretending they didn't exist. We drove to a small restaurant near my neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with comfortable booths and good food. As we sat down, Marcus looked at me. "I have an update." I raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" He laughed. "No." "Good. I paid off another credit card." I smiled. "How much is left?" He told me. It was still a significant amount, but it was far less than before. "You're doing well." "I'm trying. That's what matters." He looked down. Then he said, "I also started seeing someone." I smiled. "Already not seriously." "Good." He laughed. "I learned my lesson." I raised my coffee cup. "To learning lessons." He clinked his cup against mine. "To Mom saying no." We both laughed. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Then Marcus became quiet. "Mom, yes. Do you ever regret what you signed that morning?" I knew exactly what he meant. I thought about the office, the folders, Richard, the pen, my signature. "No." He nodded. "Even though it caused everything, it didn't cause everything." He looked at me. "It revealed everything." That answer seemed to stay with him. He nodded slowly. "I think you're right." We continued eating. After lunch, he drove me home. Before I got out of the car, he said, "I have something for you." I turned. "What?" He handed me a small envelope. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was a picture of the two of us sitting at his kitchen table. I looked at it. "When did you take this?" "That night." I smiled. On the back, he had written, "To Mom. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't mean getting everything I want. Sometimes it means hearing the truth I don't want to hear." My eyes filled with tears. I hugged him. "Thank you." He hugged me back. "I love you. I love you too." He drove away. I stood in my driveway watching his car disappear. Then I went inside. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. There is a difference. I walked into the living room and sat beside James's photograph. "Your son is going to be okay," I whispered. I smiled. He finally understands. I thought about everything that had happened, the wedding that never happened, The money Marcus thought he could count on. The documents. The signature. The financial guarantee. The betrayal. The fear. The anger. The tears. The conversations with Richard. The confrontation with Jasmine. The long nights when I wondered whether I had made the right decision. And then I realized something. The title of the story people might tell about what happened would probably be simple. A mother refused to give her son money for his wedding. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was about a woman who had spent decades believing her value came from what she could provide. I thought being a good mother meant giving. Giving money. Giving time. Giving forgiveness. Giving second chances. Giving until there was nothing left to give. But I finally learned that love without boundaries can become something unhealthy. Not just for the person giving, for the person receiving. Marcus didn't need another check from me. He needed to learn how to stand, and I needed to learn how to stop carrying him. That morning when I signed those papers, I thought I was simply protecting my savings. I was actually protecting my future, my dignity, my independence, and my relationship with my son. Because if I had continued saying yes, I might have lost all three. The most surprising part was that saying no didn't end our relationship. It changed it. We stopped talking about what I could give him. We started talking about who he wanted to become. We stopped talking about his wedding budget. We started talking about his future. We stopped talking about what I owed him. We started talking about what we owed each other as family. Respect. Honesty. Trust. Those things couldn't be deposited into a bank account. They couldn't be signed away, and they couldn't be bought. A few weeks later, Marcus came over to help me clean the garage. We found an old box of his childhood things, his first baseball glove, his school drawings, a broken toy car, a photograph of James holding him at age 5. Marcus picked up the photograph. He stared at it. Dad really believed in me. He still would. Marcus smiled. I hope so. He'd be proud of you. Even after what I did. Yes. He looked at me. Would you? I smiled. I am proud of you. He looked surprised. Why? Because you finally stopped running from your mistakes. He nodded. We continued cleaning. Later, we sat on the garage floor eating sandwiches. Marcus looked around. You know something? What I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing the wedding. And the worst thing would have been becoming someone you couldn't trust. I looked at him. You're not that person anymore. He smiled. Neither of us said anything after that. We didn't need to. Some wounds don't disappear. They become scars, and scars aren't signs that you are broken. They're signs that you survived. I still have the documents I signed that morning. I still have the copy of the invalid guarantee. I still have James's letter. But I don't keep them because I'm afraid anymore. I keep them because they remind me of the morning I chose myself, of the day I learned that saying no isn't cruelty, of the moment I stopped believing that being needed was the same thing as being loved. And most importantly, they remind me that sometimes protecting the people we love means refusing to protect them from every consequence. Marcus is building his life slowly now. No extravagant wedding, no pretending, no borrowing to impress people, no counting someone else's money. Just work, responsibility, honesty, and small steps forward. As for me, I finally started doing things I had postponed for years. I took a trip to Savannah. I joined a local book club. I started meeting friends for lunch again. I planted roses in the backyard because James had always wanted them. And every Sunday morning, I sit on the porch with my coffee and watch the sunlight move across the garden. Sometimes Marcus calls. Sometimes I call him. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes only 5 minutes. But now when he calls, I don't wonder what he wants. I know he wants to talk to his mother. And that difference means everything, because my son didn't need my savings to build his future. He needed the courage to build it himself. And I didn't need to sacrifice my future to prove that I loved him. I only needed the courage to say one word. No. That little word changed everything. It protected my money. But more importantly, it protected my voice, my dignity, and eventually, my relationship with my son. If there is one thing I hope you remember from my story, it is this: you are allowed to love someone deeply and still have boundaries. You are allowed to help without destroying yourself. You are allowed to say no without becoming the villain. And if someone only loves you when you give them what they want, then perhaps what they love isn't you. Perhaps they love what you provide. Real love survives boundaries. Real family survives honesty. And sometimes the most loving thing a mother can say is not yes. Sometimes it is simply, no, I love you too much to let this destroy both of us. Life taught me something I wish I had understood much earlier. Love should never require you to abandon yourself. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant protecting my child from every difficult consequence. I thought if I had the ability to help, I was obligated to help. But I eventually realized that there is a difference between supporting someone and carrying their entire life on your shoulders. When Marcus asked for my savings, I thought I was being asked to choose between money and my son. I wasn't. I was being asked to choose between fear and self-respect. Saying no was painful. It made me feel guilty. It made my son angry. It made me question myself. But sometimes the hardest decision is also the healthiest one. Marcus had to learn that his choices belonged to him. And I had to learn that my future belonged to me. That doesn't mean we stopped loving each other. It means our relationship finally became honest. If you are a mother, grandmother, wife, or simply someone who has spent years giving more than you receive, I want you to remember something. You matter too. Your savings matter. Your peace matters. Your dreams matter. Your future matters. You don't have to destroy yourself to prove that you love your family. You don't have to apologize for protecting what you worked hard to build. And you don't have to feel guilty because someone you love doesn't like your boundaries. Sometimes people become angry when you stop giving them access to something they had grown accustomed to receiving. That anger doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it means your boundary is working. So I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to say no to someone you deeply loved because you knew saying yes would hurt you? What would you have done if you were in my position? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If you believe family should be built on love, honesty, and respect, not money or obligation, please like this story, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me for more emotional stories about family forgiveness, betrayal, and second chances. Sometimes, one small decision can change an entire